You're listening to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters-in-laws who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I would love to begin by you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thank you so much, Erica. I am Candace Clark Trinicheri. I am turning 50 in a few months, and I am actually extremely excited about that. I am an infertility advocate and an adoption advocate and an author.
Yes, awesome. So let's talk about your journey to motherhood. Take us back on that journey and share with us your story.
I was a person that took my time to find my partner in life, my husband. We met when we were 36, got married at 38, and immediately wanted to start a family. And I was smart enough to know that it might be a little difficult. And I'm thinking to myself, we probably just have to plan a little bit more. Like it might not be the honeymoon baby, like we might have some planning that's going to go into starting our family. What I did not understand was what it was really going to take. I think when I got the news that both of my tubes were blocked after we had been trying for about 6 months, I was completely shocked. And I look back on it now, and I really shouldn't have been shocked. I suffered from endometriosis nearly my entire life, from the time I started menstruating at 13. And I'd had surgeries for endometriosis. And no one ever suggested when I was 20, 21, 22, after those surgeries, that I should think about freezing my eggs. No one ever said that, infertility is going to be a real possibility for you when you get older and start wanting to plan a family. So let's do some things now to ensure that we don't have problems in the future. So I felt very on my own and isolated and alone to find out at 38 that both of my tubes were blocked. And the only way I would possibly have a child is through IVF. And I also thought very naively that IVF was going to be a one-time thing and that I was going to have the IVF and get pregnant and that was going to be it. And it turned into 9 attempted IVFs, an egg donor. It turned into successful pregnancies, but then a pregnancy loss after every pregnancy and the first trimester. But I am happy to say that I am a mother, and I'm a mother through open adoption, and I have an amazingly beautiful and awesome 7-year-old son named Max.
Oh, awesome. It's so funny. Your son's name's Max, and my son is too. His name's Maxwell, and he will be 7 this year. So we share that in common. So I would love for you to just talk about just how you navigated that journey through going from cycle to loss and cycle to loss. I mean, there's some resilience in you to continue to try, after going through so much heartbreak. So take us through those journeys.
I would say that I think that one of the things I didn't understand about infertility was that infertility itself is a loss. And it is a loss of kind of the dream of just how you're going to have your family. It's the loss, in my case, of my own biology in the family making process. There is the pregnancy loss. There is just the loss of your life and your time and your actual sex life. Like infertility itself is a complete loss. And there's a lot of grief and trauma that comes along with that loss that I sometimes think that women just are not prepared for. So when you do talk about resilience, you have to dig deep for that resilience. And I was lucky enough that I had a wonderful husband and a wonderful RE that were very adamant in me seeking some outside help. So I wasn't kind of doing this on my own. I wasn't just trying to self-help my way out of it. I went to therapy. I found a support group. So I had a lot of support. And I can't stress enough how much support is worth in a space like this, because it is difficult. And, finding out that my tubes were blocked and going to IVF, and then finding out that I did not respond to any of the stimulation drugs. And so we had to go to the egg donor. And then being a woman of color and trying to find a donor of color is another roadblock. And there's real difficulty in that as well. And I'm Black and my husband is white. And it was very important to me that I had an egg donor that looked like me in some way. And so we really put a lot of intent in the search for that donor. And at one part, I got so frustrated because I couldn't find a donor that looked enough like me that was Black. And I was just saying to my husband, we're now at brown. She just has to be brown. I will take anything that is brown. And I just looked back on that and I'm thinking, that's where you are in this journey, that you have to constantly redefine kind of where you are and what you're doing and where you're going. Because I remember in the beginning, it was like, okay, we're going to try IVF. And if that doesn't work, that's it. And then when we couldn't use my eggs, okay, we'll do a donor egg and that's it. And then when that didn't work, it was just one more thing. Like we were constantly reevaluating what we were going to do to create the family that we wanted. And I think it's really important in this journey to be just open to the idea that family is created any way that you need and want to create your family. There's no one way and there's no perfect way and there's no right way. It's just the way that you are going to create your family. But it was hard to always find a way to start over. Pregnancy loss, the loss of a wanted child is devastating. And it doesn't get easier when you have multiple losses. I don't think that you get used to that feeling, like that mental and that physical feeling of loss and devastation when you lose a pregnancy. And those are not easy to come back from. And I am 10 years later, still some mornings overcome with grief from the pregnancies that I lost. Like that does not go away. And it doesn't go away if it's a loss in your first trimester versus a late term loss. Loss is loss and it's different, but it's still devastating for the person that has lost. So it was so important, again, to make sure that I had not only counseling, but a support group and with other women who were going through this, who really understood. Because not everyone who's outside of this infertility journey can understand the toll that it really takes.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned that a loss is a loss and, it stays with us as we carry it through. So share with us how you all, after you went through, your rounds of IVF, what was the deciding factor to move towards adoption?
So every time I tell the story, it hits a different way. And I also think that's interesting. There's some days I tell it and I don't get emotional, and I find myself getting very emotional right now. It's so hopeful when you do IVF. Like there's so much hope with each transfer. And there's so much hope during that 2 weeks where you're waiting and you're doing you're peeing on sticks when you're not supposed to, but you're doing it anyway. Like there's just so much hope in this is the time that could work. I could be one of the lucky ones. And then there is that I did get pregnant, it worked. And there's that joy, but then there's that anxiety. And then there is we've lost the pregnancy. Do we continue again? When we still had embryos, it became harder and harder with each pregnancy loss. And during my last transfer, I just had a feeling that it hadn't worked. And I don't know where that feeling came from. And my husband was getting very frustrated with me. And he's like, you don't know. Like, let's just wait. And there was just something inside me that said, this time didn't work. And I woke up one morning and I was just done. And we hadn't had our blood test yet. So I didn't know I wasn't pregnant officially. But in my head, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with this part of the journey. Like, my body is tired. Not only have I gone through this 9 times, in the interim, I've also had a surgery to remove some fibroids. That was a very serious surgery. I've had surgery to remove polyps. It's been 4.5 years. I am mentally exhausted. I am physically exhausted. And I don't see this working. And when I did go to the doctor and have my blood test, and we found out that that was the transfer that hadn't taken, I remember calling my husband and just saying, can we please be done? And it was very difficult because we still had 3 embryos left. And my RE was saying, maybe we can move on to surrogacy. Let's start looking at surrogates. And we began initially looking at surrogates. And I just kind of took a step back from that. And I said, no, I think I'm just done. Because I don't know at this point if it's the frozen embryos from the donor that maybe something's wrong with them. Like, I don't know how I'm going to take a loss from the surrogate. I just felt completely done. I can't really tell you what that felt like. It was literally just a voice in my head saying, we're done. We're just done with this way to form a family. And my husband had to get there. And that was probably one of the most difficult parts of our marriage, because we've been on the same page for years, moving toward the same goal, which is to start a family. And all of a sudden, I was done with the IVF and the transfers, and he was still wanting to continue that. And we each had to kind of mourn the end of that process in our own way and come back together. And I always like to say to people that when I woke up and I was done, I was done with the thought that I had to be pregnant and carry a child to be a mother. I knew that if my goal was to start a family, there are lots of ways to have a family. I didn't have to be pregnant and I didn't have to give birth to be a mother. And that felt very freeing in a way. It felt sad, and there's a loss of how much I wanted to carry my child. And there's a loss that my body couldn't do, like that one basic thing. But it was very freeing in that it opened me up to the larger picture that if I wanted to be a parent, I could make that happen. I could be a parent. And it's so strange, because when we did move on to adoption, everything fell into place like puzzles on a board. Everything just clicked perfectly. Within 6 months of us starting the process, like getting approved, having our home study done, we had our child. We had a profile up online through our adoption agency where prospective birth mothers could click on the profile and call us. And within 2 weeks of having our profile online, our son's birth mom called us, and we clicked with her immediately. And I flew out and I was there for her ultrasound. And in this amazing moment, this beautiful young woman who was 20 years younger than me and really young enough to be my daughter herself, we're in the room and the lights go down and the ultrasound technician is there. And the ultrasound technician says, do you want to find out if it's a girl or a boy? And I'm already crying, but trying to be really respectful of her space and her time in this moment. But I was like, yes, I want to find out. And she wanted to find out. And the technician said, it's a boy. And his birth mother just looked at me and grabbed my hand and said, what are you going to name your son? And it was the most powerful moment of my life, because this woman gave me that moment to become the mother of this child. And I always think about what it took for her as a woman to do that and how much that meant to me, because I never got to hear a heartbeat in my appointments. That was always the appointment I found out that there was no heartbeat and I had lost the pregnancy. So to not only hear the heartbeat, but to have his birth mother give me ownership of that moment as his mother for the first time was one of the most powerful and beautiful moments of my life. And we were there in the room when she delivered, and I got to cut the umbilical cord. And after 4.5 years and 9 transfers and multiple pregnancy losses I held my son, and he was my son from the moment he was placed in my arms. And I just think back to that day, and it's just a constant reminder that the most important thing in this journey was to become a parent. And I did that. And I feel like I won. And I won because I was open enough to not let anything stop me in my ultimate goal, which was to be a mom.
The 2021 Sisters-in-Law Summit is being held Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's virtual. This summit will be the premier assembly of Black women, advocates, birth workers, health professionals, and therapists working to improve pregnancy loss and infertility outcomes using the birth justice, reproductive justice, and human rights frameworks. It will offer a national space for learning, discussions, healing, and organization for Black women who have experienced pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Our 2021 theme is Healing is Our Birthright. It centers healing as a tool for joy, love, and peace on the journey to motherhood and life after loss and infertility. This Sisters-in-Law Virtual Summit meets the need to convene Black people working to improve our outcomes in pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Registration is now open and tickets are available. For our Sisters-in-Law listeners, go to sistersinlawsummit.com. That is sistersinlawsummit.com to register today. Once again, that is sistersinlawsummit.com. We do not want you to miss on Healing is Our Birthright and why we need to take control over our healing at this summit in honor of Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. sistersinlawsummit.com. I love that. Absolutely love that. There is no right path to become a mother, and sometimes our paths and our journeys take us different ways. But if you still have that goal in mind, Candace is a testimony to keep pushing and trying and look at all the options that you have available. I love your story and your testimony to just being resilient as you continue this journey. So I would love to transition and talk about your book. You just put out a book last week. Talk about your book and the inspiration for it, where we can find it, and then what you hope readers to gain from it.
Well, thank you so much. My book did come out last week. It's called Dream Redefined: The Struggle and Success Through Infertility as a Woman of Color. And I was inspired by people like yourself, honestly. I was inspired by the storytellers and by the people that let nothing stand in the way of not only sharing their story, but sharing the stories of others going through this. And specifically as a woman of color, for me, when I was diagnosed and going through infertility when I was 38, it was just me. I mean, recently we've seen women of color come forward and tell their stories, and it's not an anomaly, like it's very normalized now. But for me, when I was 38 in 2008, 2009, 2010, I didn't see anyone that looked like me in this space. I didn't see anyone in 4.5 years in my doctor's office that ever looked like me. And I felt extremely alone and isolated in this journey. And I wanted to tell stories of other women of color because I never want anyone to feel like me. I never want anyone for one moment to feel that they are alone in this journey, because it's a lonely journey and it doesn't have to be. And so I wanted to make sure we told stories not just of Black women, but of Asian women, of Latinx women, of Native American, First Nations, Indigenous women, and also the LGBTQIA community, which sometimes gets very left out of this narrative. And I wanted to tell the stories of women across all of the spectrum of infertility, because it's not always IVF. A lot of women go through IUI, a lot of women go through surrogacy. Sometimes the journey ends with foster to adopt. Sometimes the journey ends childless, not by choice. Sometimes the journey is always continuing. And I wanted to make sure that not only was I inclusive of lots of different women, to be inclusive of lots of different stories, lots of different experiences, and lots of different endings, but always with the point that wherever you are, you're going to be okay. And you're not broken. You're perfect just the way you are. And it's not your fault. And you are surrounded by love and a community that understands everything that you have gone through. So the inspiration was all of the women that are going through this. I think we have an incredible community right now. And I love that social media has enabled us to really be brought together. And I really hope what people pull from this is that all of our stories matter, that they matter, and that the more we talk and share and normalize not only infertility, but loss and what the trauma and grief look like, the better it's going to be for everybody. And the book is available on Amazon and Target.
So we definitely will make sure we link the book and as well as all of Candace's other information in the show notes, but definitely go out and support. So what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners? We are still in a pandemic. The light is at the end of the tunnel. But people still are uncertain about what this could be, especially since everybody's getting vaccinated and trying to go back out to live what a normal life used to be like, but there's still some uncertainty about what it looks like in the reproductive health front. I've seen a lot of studies on the vaccine and its effects on people long term, or we just don't know for those who are getting pregnant and trying to stay pregnant and bring babies home. But overall, I think that as a community of those who have gone through traumatic experiences, as we're healing from 2020 and 2021, what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners?
I would leave the words that educate yourself, empower yourself. That's always going to be the way forward, like through infertility, to make sure that you yourself are empowered to make some of the choices that are before you. And it is very uncertain. We actually have a story in the book where it's talking about like going through treatment during the pandemic. So it's happening. People are moving forward. People are at all steps of their process right now in the pandemic. But educate yourself, talk to your doctor, be comfortable in the clinic that you were in, and make sure that you're being served to the best of your ability. And as always, I say this: listen to yourself and your own voice. So often in infertility, everyone's got something to say, and there are a lot of outside voices. Your voice, that's the voice to listen to. That's the voice that you need to heed. And that is the voice that you need to love, because at the end of the day, you have to love yourself and know your own self-worth through this journey. Because like I said, you are not broken at all. You are perfect and you are beautiful. And if you want to be a parent, there are ways to become a parent.
Amen. So where can we connect with you after this episode?
You can connect with me on Instagram and at Infertility Stories. And then I have a website, which is www.infertilitystory.com. So at Infertility Stories on Instagram and infertilitystory.com for my website.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Candace, for sharing your story with us. I know that your story and your book will be a blessing to the community.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much. And keep doing what you're doing, because like I said, all of our stories are important.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.